Hello, Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to another Rush Generations Health and Wellness Lecture. Rush Generations is delighted to be your source of information, resources, and health promotion programs that help maximize your well-being and good health as you age. Today is Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024, and I am Kim Morley, a Rush Generations Program Coordinator. I'll be your moderator for today's lecture titled, What Matters in the New Year. Rush Generations is excited to partner with Shaman Senior Voices at Rush to bring this lecture to you. Over the course of 2024, we will feature quarterly Shaman lectures focused on one of the 4 M's of an age-friendly health system, which include mobility, medication, mind, and what matters. These areas are based on what research show are the most important things to pay attention to as we get older. Today, we'll be focusing on what matters. For today's lecture, we are delighted to have 2 esteemed Rush colleagues bringing their expertise on this important topic. Before I introduce them to you, I'd like to first thank Hannah Weitzman for helping with the production of this lecture and all of the behind-the-scenes work she does to make these lectures run smoothly. As she normally does, Hannah will be helping us manage the chat and other key aspects so that we can have a great discussion. As you know, we're live streaming this lecture via our YouTube channel, where we have dozens of other health education lectures that you can always refer back to or send to friends, family, or colleagues that would also benefit from this valuable information that our speakers offer every other week. We use the video platform Zoom, which also allows us to host a good number of people to join us over the phone. For those of you on YouTube, we ask that you please use the chat function to ask questions or to add information or discussion throughout the lecture. We'll make sure that your comments and questions make it to today's presenters. And those of you listening to the presentation via phone, you will also have an opportunity at the end to unmute your audio so that you can ask questions. We greatly appreciate you joining us today. And please note that, as we always remind you, the information offered here is for general information purposes only, and that for situations specific to you, we encourage you to always seek additional professional advice so that your specific needs are met. Now, I'm delighted to introduce you to today's speakers. First, we will hear from Yesenia Cervantes Vazquez, and she is a bilingual lead community health worker in the Health Promotion and Disease Prevention team within the Social Work and Community Health Department at Rush University Medical Center. In this role, Yesenia provides direct patient and community member chronic disease self-management, health education, and social support resource connection. Yesenia also collaborates with various community partners to implement evidence-based programs in their community. Yesenia is also a master trainer of SMRC evidence-based programs. And following Yesenia, we will hear from Dr. Esther Yoon. She is a clinical psychologist with the supportive oncology team at Rush University's Cancer Center. Dr. Yoon received her bachelor's degree at the University of Michigan and doctorate degree at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine, specializing in health psychology and behavioral medicine. Dr. Yoon has a special interest in working with older adults and patients with chronic illness like cancer, focusing on how to help patients navigate the ups and downs of their healthcare journey. In her spare time, Dr. Yoon enjoys golfing and rooting for the Michigan Wolverines during the college football season. Go Blue! And it looks like their season has been extended a little bit longer, which is exciting. So hope you've enjoyed celebrating the wins that they've had this year. So with that, I will hand things over to you, Yesenia, to get us started.
Thank you so much. Bear with me one second while I get those slides up and going. All right. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I'm very happy to be here. Happy New Year to everyone. And well, we're going to continue talking about what matters to you, which is something that we should be talking about year round, of course, right? But many of us take the beginning of a new year to reflect on what it is that matters, to set those new goals, not just with health, but with other aspects of our lives. So with that, let's dive right in. And when we talk about, when I ask the question, and when we ask you the question, what matters to you? It's a very, very big question, right? And many things and different things come up for each of us. So if you ask me what matters to me, it might be my daughter's faces that first come up, in my mind and my heart. But we each have something in this life pie, right? That if we think about life as a pie, there's all these components, right? There's all these pieces. There's so many things that make up who we are and what matters to us. So if I ask you the question, how is your health? It's very typical for us to think about it as something physical. So we're no longer thinking about all those other components in our life, like our profession or things that give us pleasure, our spiritual connections, and other material things. When somebody asks us, how is your health? We typically think about what's going on with our body. So, does something hurt? How was my last appointment? Did I take my medication? And not many of us think about it as a whole. So, in our health, everything that we go through in our lives every day is interconnected. It's definitely affecting, either in a positive or negative way, the way that we're feeling, the way that we're perceiving our health. And when something is not right, when it's off balance, it compromises our overall health. And there is a lack of attention in certain areas of our lives. So, there's a saying that says we all need bread and roses. And what that means, yes, we need bread, which are the basic necessities in life, right? To feel physically safe, to be stable, to be warm, fed. But we also need roses, meaning we need those things that give us joy, that give us pleasure, that we look forward to. And in thinking about what matters to us in our health, let's remember that we need to think about those things as well, and because they form a part of what makes us healthy. So as we age, it is very typical and it's normal for our priorities to shift a little as we're aging. In our culture, which tends to be more individualistic, which at a later time we can debate whether that's a good or a bad thing because it has its pros and its cons, right? This means that we have a higher likelihood of needing to be self-sufficient when it comes to our health. And while we might worry about taking care of ourselves as we are aging, one of the positives with that responsibility is that we get to be more active in managing our health. We're also setting a good example for younger generations, whether we have children of our own, grandkids, or other young people around in our communities. We get to set a good example if we set those priorities straight. We also don't have to wait for our health or our independence to be compromised. In other words, we don't have to lose good health or we don't have to lose our independence to start doing something about our health, right? What we do every day matters. We are the ones who are living with our pains, with our chronic conditions every day. We're not at the doctor every day. So those things that we prioritize in order to be well matter every day. So as we're aging again, we might be thinking about functioning. So that means taking care of ourselves, being independent, maybe for some of us, even not relying on others. So we ask ourselves, what is the most important thing to you when taking care of yourself? And again, for each of us, it will be slightly different. When we talk about managing our health, that refers to the quality and the length of our life, our mind and body health, managing, for some of us, it's managing pain, fatigue, other changes. And one of the questions that is good to ask ourselves is, what matters most to you when planning your healthcare? When we're talking about connections, so whether that be family, friends, our spiritual or religious communities, or the community that we're part of, we can ask ourselves which relationships or connections are most important to us. And thinking also about enjoying life, because as we're aging, that doesn't mean that we have to give up our hobbies or activities, personal growth, right? That one class we've been wanting to take all of our lives and we just haven't gotten to. We still can continue learning, being productive. And so we ask ourselves, what brings you the most enjoyment and you wish to continue doing, right? So in the spirit of continuing to reflect on our health, it's very important to us. Why do we want to improve or keep our health? And again, most of us, when asked this question, many of us first think of someone we love or people we love, or we think about responsibilities that we must tend to when we ask ourselves that question, right? And another important question to be asking is, what does aging well look like to you? These are questions that, again, are very big, that are going to be different for each of us. Aging well could look like many different things. And often we forget that it is not selfish to think about ourselves and to do what is good for each of us, right? Even if when we are reflecting on our goals and our lives, what we want to be able to do is be of service to others, or be around for our grandchildren, or for our own children, or do things that we feel like we have yet to accomplish. We can't do any of those things if we ourselves are not well, right? If we're not taking care of our health, if we can't have the mobility that we need, the stability that we need to have our days be predictable, then we're less likely to be able to participate in those things that we want to do. So in taking care of yourself, you're able to take care of others as well. Therefore, we need to remember that it is not selfish to think about yourself, as especially as we're reflecting in this beginning of the year. So we're talking a lot about what matters to us, and reflecting on why those things matter, right? And it's important to set goals and to have expectations for ourselves and to be able to reach that wellness. So how do we do it? It's a question that we all ask ourselves, right? Because we know oftentimes developing new habits or doing something that we know is right for us, it's difficult to start, to see where that should take us. So before I share with you a few tools that have been useful to me and to the work that I do, I want to share a little bit of background about what it is that I do with Rush Generations. So you already know that we offer evidence-based programs, among other things. Here's a photo of the last workshop I co-facilitated that ended in December. And as I'm leading these workshops, one of the things that I've learned, both as a facilitator, but also as a participant myself, because I like to commit to the workshops and actually do those action plans myself. I've come to realize the necessity of identification. And what I mean by that is that it's only until we're reflective and we ask ourselves the whys of why we're doing what we're doing, or why we haven't done what we want to do. In reflecting is where we can identify things that have been perhaps barriers to us setting those goals. So when we're setting goals, for example, the first thing to do is to identify, what do I want to do? Never mind what people are telling me that I should do. What is it that I would like to do for myself, for my own health? When we're dealing with difficult emotions, for example, it's become very useful to think about what it is that's causing these feelings. So what is causing the feelings, right? It's sometimes very much easier to identify what it is that I feel. I feel anger, maybe I feel frustration, maybe I'm sad, but what's behind that? right? What's the something that I can do something about? And when we're talking about barriers, for example, the identification then becomes, what is one problem I like to solve? And in reflecting on those things, and doing some like critical reflection, we have found that there are tools that are very useful for being able to do what we call self-management, right? To be setting goals for ourselves and be able to actually stick to those plans and create real changes that develop into habits. So what we have found, and we see again and again, that has worked really well for participants, is when it comes to meaningful health goals and goals in other areas of their lives, is that first of all, it has to be based on values. So again, going back to what matters to you. If it's important to you, it's much more likely that you will stick with it, will want to do it, will continue to do it, and it'll be something that is a priority for you. It also has to be realistic, something that you are able to do, keeping in mind your current health. So for example, if I haven't exercised for 10 years, it would not be realistic for me to say, okay, starting tomorrow, I'm going to go to the gym 2 hours every day and I'm going to run 10 miles. That would not be a realistic goal for me to have. What could be realistic is haven't exercised in 10 years. Let me commit to doing a 5-minute walk 2 times this week. That I could do. It has to also be something specific, which includes exactly what it is that you want to do. So oftentimes we'll hear someone, for example, and this is just an example, right? That they'll say, my goal is to lose 10 pounds. And that's a great goal or wish to have, but we need actionable items. So what it is that what exactly is it that we're going to do that's going to give us that result? So maybe I'm going to cut back on that daily and chai I have in the morning with my coffee. And I'll say, well, let me start with 2 days this week. Thursday and Friday, I won't have that pastry in the morning with my coffee, right? I'll have an apple instead. So making those specific changes that will eventually lead to that weight loss or that goal that I've been wanting to set for myself. And while we want to commit to all of this, we also need to be flexible. That means that it can change over time as needed. And flexibility is needed both because it's good or because things are not going so great. So for example, if I set this goal for myself to start walking 2 times a week for 10 minutes, and now I've gotten into the rhythm of things and it's going well, and I like the way it's making me feel because I'm getting out, I'm seeing things, I'm just changing my mood as well. Well, now I need to be flexible and change it, right? Because I'm achieving that. So I'm going to add a couple more days and maybe I can go on a little bit longer of a walk. I can do 15 to 20 minutes instead of those 10 minutes. And so I'm being flexible and changing and adding, adapting as I go. But also because sometimes life gets in the way, right? I decided to go for a swim tomorrow, for example. And if I wake up not feeling great, I feel like I'm coming down with a cold, then I need to be flexible and say, okay, tomorrow won't work. I'll do it the next day. There's nothing wrong with continuing your plan when you can do it again. Another way that we like to measure or we like to think about goals and sticking to them is this acronym that it's called SMART. So each letter stands for something, right? So S for specific, again, going back to what it is that I'm actually going to do. It has to be measurable, attainable, which also relates to realistic, relevant. Again, what matters to me, what matters to you. And it has to be timely, meaning I'm setting goals for myself that are measured in time. So there's an end date so that I don't just say, one day I will love to be a great dancer. I will instead put a timely frame on it and say, I'm going to take these classes. These are the days when they meet. And by August, I should be able to follow and dance a little better. So I'm going to put some timely measurements on those goals. And the reason that it matters to set our goals is that, well, a lot of the times when we don't have the discipline and those habits, um, we are not able to participate in the things that matter to us and the things that we want to do. So if we're thinking about, like, for example, if I were to ask you now, what activities do you want to be able to do that reflect what is most important to you, right? And as we're thinking about that, well, how has it been going lately, right? Have I actually done activities that reflect what's important to me? Or have I stopped doing them because I have fallen out of the habit of doing them, or I haven't prioritized them? I haven't made plans to be able to actually participate in those. And thinking about the question, what would you want to be doing more of? I think there's something in all of us. As I'm asking the question, I think all of us can think of something that we really wish we had more time for. And have you been doing it lately? And if the answer is not, then what are you willing to do to be able to return to doing it or to start doing it again? To carve out either that time or that space, or set other things in motion to make it something that I can actually get back to doing because it brings me joy, because I need to, and it's important to me and it matters to me. So something that we're going to be talking and hearing more from our next presenter is about how, sometimes we have valleys and peaks, right? We have what we call those ups and downs, and they're absolutely normal. And in fact, I would argue they're even necessary to building habits, because sometimes it's when we find ourselves in those valleys that we realize, well, there's a higher self that I could be reaching up to. There's something more that I could be doing. So we find that push to be able to achieve that, to be able to start planning for that. And at the same time, we have to be gentle with ourselves and remember that sometimes life gets in the way. And again, if I set one of my health goals was to walk for 20 minutes today, but something happened that didn't allow me to do it, that's okay. I'll do it tomorrow or the day after. The point is to continue going back to that. Remember when we talked about being flexible, it's like having a flexible thread, right? Which is going through all of our goals, but it's stretchy, it's flexible so that it doesn't break. We don't fail if we didn't stick right on point with our SMART goals. We can always come back to them. We can always start again. I like to think of it as there's a Buddhist saying that says, drop by drop is the water pot filled. So even if we do a little bit and a little bit here and there, right, we can achieve really good things that impact our health in a positive way. And something that is very important also is when we're trying to build these habits, which is, a habit is a redundant set of actions, repetition. And we all hope that through setting ourselves up with realistic goals and adding to them as we continue to achieve them, we hope to get to the state where our body kind of does some of those things even unconsciously, where, that walk in the morning that I used to dread going and getting up for suddenly becomes something that my body needs and my mind needs, that I look forward to doing. And so I just do it. But in order to also make that an integral part of our lives, we need to make our team, whoever that is, aware of those goals as well. In building and keeping those habits that we're reaching, we need to, for example, plan ahead, right? So we're able to keep up with those goals. Write down what matters to you. There's something really powerful about putting it in paper, about like making it a statement, if you will, right? And that makes it even more real. State your health goal. What is it that you want to achieve in your health? And for some of us, it might be a variation of things. It might be many things that are going on in our health that we know we need to slowly take care of each of them. Let your family, friends, caretakers, those people that are around you, let them know what are the things that are important to you, what are your goals, and why they're important to you. Let your healthcare team know as well. And Also let them know what you're willing to do to achieve those goals. Enlist them in being part of reaching that. And something that sometimes is very difficult for some of us, sometimes culturally, sometimes it's our personality. But for some of us, it's really difficult to ask for help or support when we need it. We think that we have to bear it all on our own, but it takes a lot of it takes a lot of courage to ask for help, but it's definitely one of the tools that we need to be able to use when we need it. We all need help from people at times, and most of us are surrounded. um, there's someone who's willing to help us. And again, return to your plans of action. If you stirred away for whatever reason, there's no wrong way to come back to a health goal that is important to you, and definitely advocate for yourself. If there's something that is being prescribed or done to you that you'd rather not, that is not, that goes against your values or against what you see as something that should be healthy to you, then speak up. And I want to end this with saying, with sharing one of my favorite quotes that reminds me to invest in myself and in my own health, which is take care of your body because it's the only place you have to live. And I do hope that some of this was helpful to you, and I'll stick around to the end for questions and answers. Kim, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Yesenia. That was wonderful information, that provided a great reminder that our, health is more than just our physical health, and especially when it comes to, setting goals, the concept of flexibility and that fear of failure that might hold us back or that might prohibit us from resuming a goal, if something gets in the way. So yeah, so thank you so much for sharing that. And Esther will be joining us to talk about stress management as we embrace the new year. So Esther, I will hand things over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me just get my slides prepared. All right. So as Yesenia was talking about, goal setting and maintaining goals in the new year and into the 2024 year can be filled with a lot of ups and downs. And how can we set ourselves up for maintaining that motivation, maintaining that goal, maintaining those behaviors as much as we can, and knowing that we're going to encounter some form of stress along the way. So that is part of my presentation, just how do we cope with stress in the new year and beyond. So I'm going to walk us through just very quickly, why do we even stress? Like, what does that do for us? The relationship between your mind and your body, and thinking about different strategies of having a new perspective around stress into the new year. And we're going to end with a little bit of a different exercise on how to rethink stress. So first and foremost, stress is as old as time. From the beginning of humanity, humans have always felt stressed. And it's actually a really important emotion that is geared towards survival. You can imagine way back when humans were hunter-gatherers, stress around where you're sleeping, do you have enough food to eat? Those are all really important motivating factors to help you problem solve that stress so that you can survive. If we fast forward into today, the modern time, that stress is the same. You have that same response to something that makes you feel unsafe or anxious, but sometimes it's not always helpful in that moment. Sometimes our stress isn't totally about surviving in that moment, but it still feels just as awful of a sensation. So I want us to kind of reflect a little bit about how do you even recognize when you have stress? Everybody feels and experiences stress in very different ways. And something I'd be really curious to have you reflect on as you listen is, what are your flags that lets you know that, oh man, I am really stressed? We'll we'll just take a few seconds here to just ponder this question a little bit. So as you're thinking about that question of how do I know that I'm experiencing stress? What are the flags? What are the signs and symptoms? I want to talk a little bit about the connection between your mind, what you're thinking, what you're feeling emotionally with your body, what you're physically feeling. When you're stressed, I'm pretty sure that you have some form of thought that lets you know that you're stressed. Maybe you worry a lot. We call it rumination sometimes. Maybe you can't focus or concentrate as well as you're used to. Maybe you feel that bubbling, simmering panic creeping in. Or maybe you feel really irritable and angry and kind of lash out at others, either verbally or maybe behaviorally in other ways. You may also notice that your body has a response to that stress. For me personally, I know that I'm stressed when I feel like my heart racing, my breathing is a lot quicker. Sometimes I get headaches right behind my eyes. You may notice different things. I've heard folks who feel whole body stress, like their whole body shakes. It feels queasy sometimes. Other folks tell me that they notice just one specific thing related to a specific part of their body. So again, thinking on that question of how do you know when you feel stressed? Sometimes it's important to think about what these signs are for you emotionally, mentally, and physically to really recognize so that we can start to act appropriately. And I think it's really important to think about these signs as we enter the new year because these are going to be the front runners of how you're going to behave after you feel stressed. So as you're acting or working towards your goal into the new year's, you're feeling that very normal stress, those ups and downs that come with life, thinking about noticing those first flags of stress, whether that's a physical feeling, an emotional feeling, or a thought that you're having. So as we talk about what really matters to you in the new year, we talked a lot about that life pie. Yesenia brought up that wonderful picture of what is it that truly matters to you? Is it family? Is it health? Is it your spirituality and faith? Your professional life? And how do we continue to focus and prioritize those things throughout the normal ups and downs of that goal setting journey, that goal maintenance journey? And I'm sure even as you reflect back on 2023, you probably can recognize a lot of different times along that year where you notice those ups and downs. Thinking now on how you navigated those dips or those moments of stress, because we're going to now move into having a different perspective. If stress is really normal, if stress can sometimes be helpful for you to problem solve or to navigate an issue that is causing that stress, how do we rethink how stress is useful to us? And this is a quote that I have found really helpful in part of my own reflection and journeys. Setbacks don't hurt your overall progress. It's how you respond to that setback that is the most important. So stress in and of itself is not a bad thing. What could be more helpful to think about is how are we responding to that stress? How are we responding to that stress, and how is that response adding value or taking away from the value of the goal that we've set in place for us? And I think sometimes it's helpful to map out and see this new perspective in practice. So I call this the stress map. We have something that happens, and I'm going to call it a trigger. This could be something as simple as being stuck in traffic, waiting in line for the checkout at the grocery store. Something that happens that elicits a stress response. You feel the stress after that thing happened. I'm sitting in traffic trying to get into work, and I feel stressed because traffic is not moving. I feel stressed, and I start to feel anxious. I want us to start asking ourselves, is this helpful? Is this stress helping me in this moment? Can I solve the problem? Because remember, stress is not always a bad thing. So as we ask ourselves, is this stress helpful to me right here, right now? Is this stress helping me solve the problem? Sometimes the answer is going to be yes, stress is helpful, or I can solve the problem. So let's do that. Let's solve the problem around the things that are causing you that stress. Sometimes the answer is going to be no, the stress isn't helpful, or the stress isn't able to be problem solved or easily problem solved. And there's lots of those things. Health is a really great example. We can't always problem solve health related stresses. And in that case, I think it's really helpful to think about how do we cope, as hokey as it sounds. And let me be clear that coping won't necessarily change your situation, but it can certainly change your perspective on that situation, and sometimes can change how you experience that situation. And coping can be done in a lot of different ways. You'll probably find certain coping strategies that resonate more with you. So, for example, I think journaling is a big one that everyone talks about or suggests. Some folks love to journal, to process thoughts, events, emotions through writing. Personally, I really don't enjoy journaling. It's tedious and I don't find a lot of pleasure in it. It actually makes me feel more stressed when I'm told I should journal. But luckily, there's so many different ways to cope, whether that's physical activity, going for a walk, getting some time outside, moving your body around. It could be meditation. It could be just doing hobbies that you find really enjoyable or something that just gives you a lot of comfort. My sister loves to crochet. I love to bake and golf, and those are things that I enjoy doing and help alleviate or kind of get rid of some of my stress. And I think it's important that you try and test out a few different coping skills, coping strategies to find what works for you. And you may actually find that some coping strategies may be a better fit for certain situations. And for today, I wanted to take some time to introduce you to maybe one coping strategy that you maybe have heard of or maybe have not heard of, but it's called mindfulness. So what exactly is mindfulness? It's not a technique to make your stress, anxiety, or unhappiness go away. The goal of mindfulness is to really help you maintain a different kind of focus on what you can control versus what you can't control. So officially, it's paying attention in a particular way on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And this is a quote directly taken from Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who is kind of the father, creator of mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques. And this goal is to really help you focus on, again, what you can control versus what you can't control, and hopefully finding ways to essentially take some of the edge off of that anxiety, that stress, that frustration that you may be feeling. What's powerful is that you still have things that are stressful in your life, but you've made that mental space or mental shift to manage and navigate those stresses more comfortably and maybe with a little bit less anxiety. So again, going back to that mind-body interaction we talked about, you can try to quiet your mind by calming your body. It sounds really counterintuitive, but sometimes it's really hard to tell your mind to stop thinking, stop worrying, calm down. The mind is just going to do what it wants when it wants to. Your mind was built to think, so it's going to think a lot, especially when you're stressed. It may be more helpful to think of ways to physically calm down your body, and maybe your mind will follow. So that's something that we're going to explore together in these next few minutes today. How can we incorporate mindfulness in a daily, very practical way? Again, meditation is a form of mindfulness. It's not the only way to do mindfulness. And research has really shown us that regular practice of meditation, of mindfulness, of stress, of relaxation strategies can really help us reduce stress, anxiety, things like even depression, as well as your cognitive functioning. It can help you with memory, attention, self-awareness, and sometimes even with sleep. Something as a caveat, mindfulness is essentially a brain workout. It doesn't come naturally, and that's okay because, again, your brain was built to think a lot, and trying to give it one thing to focus on can be really difficult if you've not had the habit or training in it before. So right now, I want us to think of this very brief exercise we're about to do as a very first step in a brain workout for mindfulness. And just as you would with any sort of physical activity, the more you do it, the more you train and do that physical activity, the easier it becomes. Practice regularly and we'll build off of what you have. So let's try a little bit of mindfulness together. And I'm going to walk us through a mindful breathing exercise just because it's free and I love free things. Breathing is usually with you for most circumstances. You don't need to pay for anything to breathe usually. So I think it's always helpful to think about tools that are in your at your disposal to use when you need to, and breathing is one of them. So as we think about starting this, I want us to create an environment that's going to help us with this mindfulness exercise. So whatever place you're at, whatever room you're at, finding kind of an area where you can sit down and not have too many distractions around you. So if you have the TV on, if you have sounds that are happening outside, finding ways to limit those distractions as much as possible. And I'll give us a few moments to do that. And as you find that quiet space to do this mindfulness exercise with me, feel free to sit or to lay down, whatever feels comfortable for you. And you're welcome to close your eyes or keep them open. If you choose to keep them open, I ask that you just have a soft gaze. You don't need to stare super hard at one spot in the room, just soft gaze. And I want us to first start off by paying attention to your breath. You don't need to do anything with it. Just taking a few moments here to just notice the way that you're breathing. We breathe all the time and we don't think too much about it. I'm asking us to pay a little bit closer attention to just the normal rhythm of your breathing. Maybe noticing the rise and fall of your chest with your inhales and exhales. Maybe even noticing the temperature of the air that you're breathing in. Again, you don't need to do anything extra to your breath. All we're doing is just noticing your breathing, where it's at. On your next inhale, I'm going to ask us to extend your breath or deepen your breath just a little bit. So let's say that your natural rhythm of breathing is about 2 seconds inhale, 2 seconds exhale. I want us to see if we can extend that inhale and exhale by maybe half a second or a full second. Slowing that breath down just a little bit. Breathing in through the nose, exhaling out through the mouth. If that's uncomfortable, feel free to breathe in and out through the mouth or in and out through the nose, whatever feels good for you. And you may notice as you take these deeper inhales, the rise and fall of your chest also extends a little bit. Your chest rises just a touch more with that deeper inhale. And we'll do this one more time with a deeper inhale in, exhaling out before you return back to your normal rhythm of breathing. And just taking this time to reflect. All we did was breathe, nothing more to it than that, but you practiced about a 2-minute, 3-minute exercise of mindfulness. Literally being more mindful or paying attention to your breath. And you may have noticed small or big sensations related to the physical feeling of breathing. You may have noticed that because you were paying attention to your breath, that your mind maybe didn't wander as much or it wasn't thinking as much. You may have noticed physical sensations of relaxing as you took those deeper inhales and exhales. You may have also noticed nothing, no changes, no differences, and that's all okay. I'd be curious to hear more about everyone's practices and what they observed in the Q&A. But that is an example, this mindful breathing is an example of a daily practice of mindfulness that you can do at any point of day, any point of time. All you need is yourself and maybe about 30 seconds to a minute of concentrated time just thinking about your breathing. Again, does that change the nature or the thing that's stressing you out? No. But can it help you? Can it help you with stress? Maybe. And I think it's helpful for you to practice and see where it takes you. I appreciate you guys, you all being willing to sit with me and do a mindfulness breathing exercise and thinking of ways that we can rethink our stress as we try to prioritize the values and the things that are important to us in the new year. So thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful start to the new year, and I will give the baton back to Kim.
Thank you so much, Esther. That was just, wonderful information on stress in general, especially like the history of it. And, we have that connotation that stress is something negative. And I appreciate you, sharing that, stress can be helpful. And if we identify when stress is not helpful, then what are those, strategies that we do to help, minimize some of that discomfort that comes along. So thank you so much for that. And so this is the point in the lecture where we transition to our question and answer portion for both of our speakers. So if you have called into the Zoom meeting, please unmute yourself by pressing *6. And you can ask either Yesenia or Dr. Yoon any questions you may have. And then if you're listening on YouTube, please enter any questions in the chat box and we will ask those questions to our speakers on your behalf. And it looks like maybe one caller has unmuted themselves.
Yes, hello.
Hi there.
How you doing, Peter? Oh, you have some wonderful programs. This is another wonderful program.
Oh, thank you.
Just to let you know. I was wondering, years ago at the University of Chicago, there was Eugene Gendlin. He had a group called Focusing. Now he's in New York, which brings up some of the things you mentioned in both speakers about just whatever only thing that's important is right now. Americans tend to look at back or forward or politics. But mindfulness, is in which you brought up with those exercises, is, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Eugene Gendlin, with Focusing, it's called. And this is another good example of what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, Peter, with that name. I don't know if either of our speakers are, but it's great to hear.
A long time ago.
I gotcha.
About 20 years ago. But this is mindfulness, very important, and Americans are too hung up. I think we're, on politics and everything, instead of enjoying just that moment. It's hard to do.
Yes, it definitely is a challenge, and you bring up a very good point of, stress that is worldwide, too.
Mm-hmm.
Is it national politics? Is it things going on internationally? There's a lot
mm-hmm.
of stress in our world.
Right. So I was going to ask what they should think coping is. How should you cope? Just turn off the TV, or
When you find out, let us know.
That's true. Happy New Year, everybody, by the way.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good point of, is stress helpful or not? And, with the news, let's say, we, it's important to be informed, but on the other hand, is maybe consuming too much of that, causing, undue stress. Yeah. Dr. Yoon, do you have any insight into, how to handle something where it's important to stay educated, but then, can also have a negative impact on our emotional or physical health?
Yeah, it's going to be very broad, very general. I think balance is really helpful. And to your point, Kim, and also Yesenia's from her presentation, everyone's balance looks a little bit different. Sometimes your balance is you want to be as informed as possible about like the news and the politics and the world events that are happening at large. And that feeds a sense of purpose, of you knowing what's happening, feeling involved in the current events. And that may feel good for you despite some of the stress that comes with it. For others, the balance is right now, I just need to decompress. I know the things happen in the world with or without me. And for right now, I need to prioritize how I'm feeling in this moment, which is too much stress. So taking time away, maybe doing a news diet, social media diet, tech diet, whatever you need to do. Maybe spending time with values other than news that feels good for you, family, time by yourself, time spiritually. I think that's always important. So again, really recognize that we have individual values, individual preferences for what balance may look like, and really finding concrete ways to act on that balance.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, and especially relates well to what Yesenia had mentioned at the beginning too. Is this will look different for everybody, and so there may not be a one size fits all approach to finding balance, but aligning with your goals, like both you and Yesenia mentioned, or I'm sorry, aligning with your values, and that can be helpful and informative for how to find that. Although it, as always, as a reminder, it may not ever be perfect, that balance, and yeah, it may shift, but yeah. I know that one question that came up for Yesenia, when you had mentioned the questions that we ask ourselves to help identify what matters in different aspects of our life, or when we, kind of begin that process of setting goals. Do you have any recommendations for, like workbooks that could be helpful with that, or, ways we could take just a piece of paper maybe and, outline, those different things? Do you have any recommendations? Just have maybe something concrete that we can refer to?
Sure, yeah. Like I said, writing, and whether you share it or keep it or not, I mean, it always just makes things a little bit clearer, a little bit more true, I think. First, I want to say that I loved Esther's point about asking ourselves if it's helpful. One of the things I always like to ask myself is, when I'm confronted with something that I think is beyond my control, or maybe not, I'm not very happy about, I ask myself, is this the only way to think about it, right? Because even in really tough situations, we can find a lesson in them at the very least. At the very least, they'll teach us what not to do, or that we don't like that, and so we steer away. But to answer your question, it's very helpful to find, identify what it is that we want to create actions around. So, for example, if I've been struggling to get along with my neighbor, for example, and that's my issue, let's say, then maybe what I want to do is list 3 to 5 possible solutions, 3 to 5 possible things I could do. Write them down. Then step 3 would be choose which one you want to try first. And if that one works, then you solved the problem, you got it. Maybe you had a conversation about how you don't like them moving your trash bins or something like that. And if that doesn't work, then you have these 3 other suggestions, right, that you can try next, and kind of like move through them, like process of elimination. Sometimes we go through all those things and things aren't working. It's always good to like kind of like if we've tried a few things and they're not working, out of our list of possible solutions, then ask someone who you respect and you think will be able to give you an honest opinion, or somebody who's gone through something similar, and ask, this worked for you, or like, you had a similar situation, how did you deal with it? Sometimes we get so in our head that we forget others have found solutions, or maybe we ourselves have done something in situations similar to this. So what have I done in the past that worked? And then I think if all else fails, I would suggest that sometimes, similar to what Esther was saying, sometimes coping means accepting that at this precise moment, maybe that situation cannot be resolved. And that's okay. That doesn't mean I'm giving up forever, or that I'll never be able to fix that. It just means maybe this isn't the right time. Let me continue thinking about it. Maybe I even grow my list of possible solutions, but maybe right now it's not an actual item, and that's okay. I hope that kind of answered your question in a long-winded way.
Yeah, no, that was a wonderful description. And it gives you, something concrete of like, step 1, 2, 3, and, having something that, is visual too. You can write down different possible solutions. At least for me, that resonates well. Because I could oftentimes, just think of so many different things and be overwhelmed by so many different thoughts, and not knowing how to, like you mentioned during your talk, break it down into just like smaller steps, and look for a solution that way. So, yeah. Or the option too of, like you said, sometimes it just doesn't need action at the moment, and hold that, as something later, to think about. So, yeah. Thank you, Yesenia. There's another question that I saw come in for Dr. Yoon. One of our callers asked, like, what do you do when there is this tendency to, avoid certain stressful situations or avoid anxiety producing situations? What are ways to maybe try and overcome some of that, when like the avoidance, just feels more comfortable than not?
Oh boy, you are preaching to the choir. Humans love to avoid, and again, that's really normal. I always bring up this example for patients that I work with. When you burn your hand on a stove, you're not going to try to touch the hot stove again in the future. That's a good kind of avoidance. You don't want pain and suffering. Sometimes, to your point, you can't always avoid stress, anxiety, and suffering as much as we want to. But man, we are really, really good at trying our best to try and avoid or procrastinate. Those two tend to go together. I think something that's really helpful is the first step, which you sounds like have already done, which is the awareness, knowing that you have a tendency to avoid. That is often the hardest step, is to recognize that you have a habit. The second is being able to start to realize that there's alternatives either to your thinking or to the behavior. And I think we've talked about this a lot already, but mapping out what those alternatives are. Sometimes it's about visually seeing on pen and paper that you have different ways to approach a situation that you normally maybe would avoid. I also think, I'm making a plug because I work in clinical psychology, so I'm biased, but I do think sometimes seeking counseling, whether it's formal counseling through therapy with a psychologist or a social worker or licensed counselor, that can be helpful. I also think there's a lot to be said with informal therapy, just using friends and families that support you and give you good advice, good listening ear, and a lot of empathy can be really helpful to explore what's the situation that you're avoiding, why are we avoiding it, and what can we do about it. So just some food for thought for now.
Yeah, those are like, thank you for offering, multiple solutions in that sense, and giving us the opportunity to think what would be something that would, work well for where we are right now. but that reminder too of, just having that awareness and naming what, avoidance or procrastination might be. Because that's, I for myself, I know it's hard to, admit that at times, like, why is something going on? And like, I think it might be, I think it might be something like this. So yeah. I think there's maybe another caller that would like to ask a question.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I had a question. You had just mentioned things that you like to avoid. And, I've tried to use SMART goals in the past. I've tried to write down, my goal. And I think it's really something that I really just don't want to do. And I have managed to procrastinate for 6+ years on this particular topic. Any suggestions? It's basically revising my will.
That's a big one. I so appreciate you bringing it up because I think when it involves what I like to call our personhood, so our sense of self, whether that's health related, whether that's related to death and dying, it's really hard to work towards goals related to those things because it's scary. And as
Yes.
a society, I think we as a society don't do a great job of talking about death, dying, and planning for end of life when we're still living because it's a very taboo subject. I actually think it's really important and can actually relieve a lot of stress once you do it. But getting there can be difficult, and sometimes it's helpful to do it with somebody else. Not having to do it alone, having somebody either hold you accountable or to guide you, to offer suggestions, or to just be there as a supportive presence. Sometimes it's just about having another person involved so that you're not isolated in that goal that you're trying to accomplish.
Well, and I think it depends also on what type of experience you might have had in the past. And I had a not so pleasant experience with my first attempt at that topic. And so now to go back and do it again is scary.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really normal
And
emotional
costly.
response. Yes, there's also the logistics and the finances involved. I think the emotional response you have sounds really normal given the situation. And again, just depending on who you are as a person, it might be helpful to get somebody else involved so that it doesn't feel as scary. Just depends.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I want to add to that because I have experienced it, not myself, but I say this not to guilt you, of course. I say this as when my mother passed away a couple years ago, which was an incredibly painful and stressful time. Having in writing exactly what she wanted, both for her health and for the material things, made the pain more bearable because extended family was not pleased with many of the choices. But I took solace, and I'm the only child, by the way, so it's all on me. I took solace in knowing that I was doing the morally right thing to do because I was following her wishes. So something to think about that, there are things that we leave for our family members even after we pass away. And we want to leave them with as less stress as possible. And unfortunately, sometimes in time of loss, family and others don't always bring out their best colors. So we want to avoid situations that could be avoided. And also just a suggestion, if you haven't done something like your I'm drawing a blank here, but like the documents that state what you want for your healthcare, like how far you want your healthcare to go. If you haven't done that either, I would suggest it might be a little easier to start there and have like one of the hospital counselors kind of guide you through that process. That might be a good first step into, and then being able to do your will as a second step, right? Like now that I've accomplished this and it's in my medical record, maybe then I could do the finances, which are very complicated as well. But thank you for bringing that up as well. It's so important.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. Are there any other callers that would like to ask a question? Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, this is Sheila. Thank you so much. The presenters were excellent, and I appreciate all of the comments. But one thing that I've been struggling with when it says what matters, one of the things I want to do is remain independent. But one of the problems I have, could the presenters give some strategies on how do you relinquish control?
Something that sometimes is helpful around independence and control is thinking about we don't always have control, even when we are at our most independent. We just feel like we do. And in psychology, we actually call it the control fallacy. We think we have a lot of control when in fact, there's plenty of things not. So, likewise, when you feel like you're losing a lot of the things that make you feel independent, recognizing that there are things out of your control that are loss and almost grief in that sense of self and that sense of independence. And also recognizing that you still have many things in your control. And it might be about refocusing on what are those things that you do have control over that you are still independent around.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Shirley. And yeah, it's true that there are a lot of things that aren't in our control, and it can take some time to look at what is in our control, and that can give us maybe some relief to that struggle. And I know in these lectures we always try to emphasize those aspects that are within our control, to just be able to build ourselves up in some way, to empower ourselves. That was part of the purpose with this lecture today, as we welcome in a new year, is how do we empower ourselves to approach this new year, and what can our goals be, even if they look a little different maybe than they did in 2023, or even from 10 years ago or something. So with that, I will conclude our question and answer portion. Thank you to everyone that contributed to the discussion, and thank you so much, Dr. Yoon and Yesenia, for wonderful presentations on how to approach this new year in a practical way, with setting goals for ourselves, looking at what our health is like, and how can we continue to improve on that, and then what do we do when we encounter stressful situations that aren't helpful to us, and how do we cope with that, and keeping in mind that it can be something as simple as a 2-minute mindfulness exercise. So thank you so much for that. And so for our final portion of this lecture today, I will be sharing with you the upcoming workshops and classes that Rush Generations is offering, and hope that something might be of interest to you and could help you get started on that path to identifying the goals that you have for this year, and maybe even getting a step closer to achieving those. So first, we have our gentle chair yoga class. This is open to anyone, no matter your skill level, if you've ever practiced yoga before or not. All of these poses too can be modified for either standing, sitting on the floor, or even in a chair. And the class will cover mindful movements, guided breath work, and meditation practice, with the purpose of increasing flexibility, your range of motion, as well as balance and strengthening your body overall. Yoga has also been proven to relieve pain, stiffness, and sore joints. And so our next class will be held virtually via Zoom starting on Thursday, January 11th and running through February 15th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. It's a total of 6 sessions and has a fee associated with it, but we do have scholarship opportunities. So please call this number 312-942-8182 to get more information or to enroll. And after that, starting the Monday after, we have our Matter of Balance workshop. And this is an 8-session workshop for individuals who may have begun restricting their physical or social activity because they have a fear of falling. And this workshop utilizes problem solving, confidence building, and balance improving exercise, along with training our thoughts to have more confidence in not falling, improving our balance, and all of those things. So this will run on Mondays and Wednesdays, starting January 15th through February 12th from 10 till noon, and will also be virtual, and pre-registration is necessary to receive all of the workshop materials, so please call our 800 number and we will get you set up with that. And we also will have our chronic pain support group that is the second Thursday of each month. The next group will be held on Thursday, January 11th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And this is offered hybrid, so it'll be in person at Rush, or you can participate by calling in by phone. And a little bit more about this group, research shows that social engagement can reduce the experience and burden of chronic pain. So in this supportive group, participants are able to share and receive information, give and receive support from each other, and build and practice healthy habits to better manage pain. So if you would like to participate this or just to get more information about it, please call our 800 number and we'd be happy to provide that to you. And we continue to offer our Senior Connections Friendly Caller program. So if you or maybe even someone you know is feeling lonely or socially isolated, we would encourage you to reach out and get connected with this program. This program connects older adults with a trained volunteer for weekly phone calls that are designed to be centered on what you would like to talk about. There's nothing formal about this or any kind of structured screening questions. It's really just to establish a friendship and make a genuine connection. So please call us to get connected with that program. And then lastly, as we talked about at the beginning of the lecture, we have our Shulman Senior Voices program that aims to empower older adults to discuss what matters most to them as they age. And I hope that in attending this lecture today, you've thought more about that question, you know, what matters most to you right now, or what does aging well look like to you? And we would love to hear your reflections on that. So if you would want to share your story, you can do so by scanning the QR code with your smartphone or entering the website address into your browser search. And feel free to share, you know, even what your goals might be for the new year. We'd love to hear from you. And our next lecture will be our annual Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. And this year's lecture will be titled, or is titled, Health Equity is Everyone's Business. And this lecture will be hosted in combination with our Office of Community Health Equity and Engagement. and it's a panel event with 3 different panelists, and each of them are either leaders in the community or industry experts discussing on how a greater sense of community can help to ensure everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their highest level of health. And this will be at a new time just for this lecture at 11:30 a.m. and running until 1 p.m. So we'd love to see you there. And lastly, this is our 800 number for Rush Generations, 1-800-757-0202, and please use that number for any questions about today's lecture or for additional information on the programs and classes that we have coming up, or if you are just looking for any kind of support, we would love to be able to offer that to you. And lastly, this will be my final lecture with Rush Generations, and so I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everyone for their attendance and participation over the last year that I've been hosting these. It's been an absolute wonderful experience, and love to be here alongside with everyone as we try and take care of ourselves as we age. So thanks to everyone, and wish everyone a wonderful new year, and hope everyone continues to stay healthy. Take care.